Hi, this is Ashish R. Bedekar and welcome to my podcast, The ARB Show. I'm super thrilled to introduce today's guest, Anirban. Anirban was my manager at the start of my career and I thoroughly enjoyed working in his team. He has had a diverse experience ranging from heading a corporation in the USA to leadership experience in strategy, sales, marketing, corporate social responsibility, and sustainability within the Mahindra and Mahindra Group. Anirban, welcome to the show. Do share your life journey and your current focus as head of Center of Sustainability, Mahindra University. Over to you, Anirban.
Thank you for having me on the podcast, Ashish. Wonderful talking to you again. Brings back so many old memories from the time we were a part of strategy and product management, a new department at the farm equipment sector of Mahindra. As it turns out, Ashish, I spent almost 15 years in the farm equipment sector. You'll remember we all joined M&M when Mr. Davasia had this vision of becoming the largest tractor company in the world. I'm happy to say that in 2009, we made the announcement that we were indeed the largest tractor company in the world. So all the work we did in 99 and so on finally came good. Post that stint with farm equipment sector, I went on to CSR and sustainability in the Mahindra Group. I was the chief sustainability officer for a very long time, 7-8 years. And then subsequent to that, I've come here to the Mahindra University to set up and run the Center for Sustainability. That's more or less it, Ashish. There were some stints in HP division of Blue Star and Modi Xerox, but they were so long ago.
Right. Excellent. So, Anirban, as discussed, the format of the show is where the guest talks about top 5 areas, top 5 trends in a specific area of their expertise. And given your current focus on sustainability, it would be great if you could share some insights on top 5 trends in sustainability, and that would be very helpful to the audience. So maybe over to you, Anirban. Let's start with your first trend which you see in the sustainability area.
So let me tell you 5 of the trends and we'll take them one by one. There are trends galore in this area. This is a new area, it's developing, there are new things happening every day, the old things are not finishing, so there are trends galore. So we'll talk about one trend which is about negotiating goals. We'll talk about the second, which is about reducing emissions. A third, which is reducing pollution other than emissions. A fourth, which is to take carbon dioxide out of the air. The fifth, which is to adapt to all the things that have happened over time. And if we have time, we'll talk about new technology and reporting and disclosures and how this will completely change the way we live.
That sounds like a plan.
So shall we do the first trend then?
Yeah, floor is all yours.
So, this climate problem is a very big problem. And solving the problem involves making a lot of changes. It's a big problem because if we don't solve it, the way the systems of the earth work will get permanently changed. They'll get permanently changed because the wind patterns will change, the ocean currents will change, as a result of which our precipitation patterns will change. It will get too hot or too warm. The Arctic Circle will have no ice for some days or months of the year. And, taking a ship through the Arctic Circle, which was unthinkable, will become possible, and so on. So it is going to change if we don't, it will change the way the earth works in so many different ways. So it's a very big problem. Now, when you're solving such a big problem, which has got created over a couple of 100 years' time, you've got to get everybody on board. Every nation has to make a contribution. It's true that some nations have made a huge contribution to creating the problem, and many nations have had a small contribution. But despite that inequity, everybody has to contribute to solving the problem. And that's why there has been this very long conversation between governments to set goals on what we will do to solve the climate problem. In 2015, at COP21 in Paris, a momentous accord was signed when everyone agreed to take enough action to keep average temperature rise below 2 degrees and, if possible, below 1.5 degrees. So that was one number goal. But that's a very large goal. There are many goals within that. In Dubai, a few days ago, they agreed to triple renewable energy. They agreed to start looking at reducing the use of fossil fuels. A big step forward. So in this way, the governments are working together to set meaningful goals so that we are able to tackle the climate problem at a scale which will be large enough to ensure that the world remains a comfortable place to live. So that's trend number one.
Okay, so here when we talk of COP and various goals are quite well known, but just I'm speaking as a layman. Now, a big goal, which is like a very big audacious goal, is it possible to break that down at an individual level so that as a citizen, what I am supposed to do? For example, it could be as easy as, hey, you know what, try to reduce. Be judicious in whatever resource you're using in your personal life, or if it is possible, try to reuse. Or is there some kind of guidance which you can give for how people can break that lofty goal into their personal life?
The broad trends are, which human beings can adopt. One, use any resource you're using with greater degree of efficiency. Two, reduce or eliminate any pollution that you're causing. So what resources do we use? We wear clothes. We have loads of clothes which we don't use for years, but it's still there in the almirah, and we go and buy more. Every time we consume more, there is more energy getting consumed, there is more pollution getting made. So very simple way to look at things is consume by all means, but consume what you need. Yeah, so that is one way of being resource efficient. Same thing about consuming energy. Whatever we do, we end up consuming energy in some form or the other because most of the things are operated through electricity. So the more we reduce our consumption of energy, whether it is electricity or fossil fuels in vehicles, the lesser pollution we cause. So two simple things that we can do. In a broader sense, while all these things cause some level of pollution, but in a broader sense, when we throw plastic away, it ultimately ends up in some place killing animals or reducing the ability of the earth to sequester carbon. Because I don't know, many of your listeners may have heard of the Great Pacific Plastic Patch, where there is an area 3 times the size of France with floating plastic on it. It's all gone from homes of yours and mine and other people, right? And usually plastic and various other things that cause pollution end up in water bodies, and that reduces the ability of the ocean to sequester carbon and also affects life inside the ocean. So right. If we have to do 2 broad things, consume wisely, efficiently, and ensure that you don't cause pollution.
Got it. So here, many of the corporates, I'm sure, would also be taking care that, you have used sustainable materials or reusable packaging or things like that in the overall product or a manufacturing workflow. So any such initiatives from the Mahindra Group which you would like to share? It could be saving of electricity or maybe re-engineering stuff so that you actually use less resource in the workflow.
Actually, everything I've talked about is happening in the Mahindra Group. That's where I
Excellent.
learned all this anyway. We were the first in the world to commit to doubling energy productivity. We are almost there. We were given 25 years. We'll get there in 12 or 13. So the amount of energy we used to use in 2008 to make one vehicle, now we'll make two.
Wow.
Mahindra Holidays has committed to be 100% powered by renewable energy. They are on their way. Our factories in Maharashtra now use about 50% renewable energy. And very soon we'll get to 100% as the policy evolves and it makes sense for the business to scale even more. Again, we were the first, and certainly the first in the country. And I understand our Igatpuri factory was the second in the world to be certified as being zero waste to landfill. Ashish, you live in Bombay. You may remember that the Deonar landfill caught fire one time and there was pollution all around. So when studying the causes of the fire, we learned 60% of the waste in a landfill in India is food waste. And that creates methane, which is combustible and catches fire from time to time. So in the Mahindra Group, we came to a conclusion that we will not send anything to landfill. And by now, some 25 locations across the group are certified as being zero waste to landfill, including our Mahindra World City in Chennai.
Wow.
You probably are aware that we used to plant about 1 million trees a year. That's up to more than almost 2 million trees a year now. And there is a effort to take it to 5 million trees a year. We have 24 plus million trees out there now, sequestering carbon mostly in Araku Valley. So almost anything that needs to be done in the sustainability space is happening at the Mahindra Group. And we must not forget that the biggest contribution we are making is making the transition to electric vehicles, ensuring that all buildings we built are built green, making the greenest resorts possible in our country. In fact, Mahindra Holidays has been recognized as having the largest number of properties with green buildings. I could go on, but the good news is that the Mahindra Group is recognized as being a responsible group that is doing what is required. Our commitment to being net zero is by 2040, and I have no doubt that we will get there.
Fantastic. So that's great. So any other insights which you would like to share from the various trends which you referred to briefly?
So all these commitments that I said that are being made in the Mahindra Group are related to the trends that we will talk about. One first was negotiating goals, and we talked about countries negotiating amongst themselves to set goals. You asked a question on individuals, and then we ended up discussing corporations setting goals for themselves. Right? So as we set those goals, achieving those goals, where does it take us? So one, it helps to reduce emissions sharply. So every time we reduce consumption of energy, there is reduction of emissions because that much less coal is being burnt out there. 70% of our power comes from burning coal anyway. Right? So huge amount of work in reducing emissions. In fact, they say that if you were to reduce emissions by being energy efficient, it's like having a whole new source of energy itself. And this is a very big area of work, typically referred to as mitigation among sustainability professionals. It is a kind of work that has very good returns on investment. In the Mahindra Group, investment in energy efficiency related projects of about 245 crores in a 5-year period gave us a savings annuity of 145 crores a year. As you can see, the payback period is less than 2 years. Right. And there are many, many such opportunities. Right. Different industries have different opportunities, but all of this then leads to reducing emissions.
Got it.
The good news is that many organizations are doing this. The bad news is it's still not happening fast enough.
Right. Also on that point, I've heard about carbon credits, right? So would you like to share some light on that as well? Maybe that could be an incentive which people, which companies can look at as a carrot to really accelerate this.
Let's talk about that when we are talking about the trend on taking carbon dioxide out of the air.
Okay, no worries.
That's how you earn credits anyway. Right. But let's talk about reducing pollution other than emissions first. So emissions typically cause a lot of air pollution along with all the dust that we generate. But there is more to pollution than just this. Every industrial process leads to a lot of effluents, leads to a lot of waste material that so far used to end up in landfills. Now, these wastes would affect the soil and very often would go on to affect water bodies. And when it would go on to affect water bodies, it would then affect life underwater. And that's why you have one sustainable development goal about life underwater. Right? And so life underwater is not only threatened by fishing, but it is also threatened by the pollution that we cause. Very interestingly, Ashish, when we decided to become zero waste to landfill, our businesses and our factories started figuring out how they could create value from the waste that was being produced in their factories and businesses. And very interesting examples developed of, making carpets from soiled gloves, which were, of course, cleaned during the process of making carpets, making paver blocks from slag from the iron and steel plant, and so on. So lots of new interesting ideas came, some of which have seen the light of day. We make transformer cores from some of the steel scrap that used to come from our business that cuts steel sheets for other businesses. So many such ideas emerged, some businesses have emerged, as a result of which the organization is able to move towards becoming zero waste to landfill and making a positive contribution to the trend of reducing pollution overall. Right? The fourth trend is taking CO2 out of the air. This is actually, the world had a balance on how much emissions would happen, and all the trees and the oceans and everything would absorb a lot of those emissions. So the incremental pollution in the air was very small. The increase in temperature, there was an increase, but it was very marginal. For hundreds and thousands of years, it didn't matter. But in the last 150, 170 years, from 1850 onwards, everything has just grown exponentially. Population has gone up by more than 8 times. So for these people, this large population, one needs food, so that has led to deforestation. Not only has food for human beings led to deforestation, food to feed animals that human beings eat also require land, and that has caused more deforestation than that which was required to grow food for human beings directly. Right? So huge amount of deforestation thanks to the growth in population. And then there's been a rapid improvement in lifestyle, which unfortunately has used fossil fuels in a very large way, which has meant huge amounts of emission. So now we have a disbalance. The amount of pollution going up in the air has increased manifold, and the ability of the earth to absorb the emissions has kept going down, because we've been ruining the health of life on the earth and life underwater. Right? So if you've got a disbalance like this, then part of the solution lies in taking carbon dioxide out of the air. And this is what is leading to conversations on carbon credits and so on. It's an important part of the solution. The best way to take carbon dioxide out of the air is through natural solutions. Nothing is more powerful than that. However, there is a new technology that is developing called direct air capture. we will need to do everything that we can possibly do to keep the negative effects of pollution under control. Therefore, it's okay if DSC turns out to be a feasible way of working, why not? But we will not be able to solve this problem if we do not keep restoring nature's ability to deal with emissions in the air. And this is why there is this conversation on credits today. Actually, it's not a new conversation. Some experiments have happened. There was something called the Clean Development Mechanism, which was started in the world. And a lot of developing countries did projects which would reduce or mitigate emissions. And that generated credits, and they sold it to developed countries where they would get a value for the credits that they had produced. Gradually that died out because supply was much greater than demand. But it's coming back now. Article 6.2 and Article 6.4 of the Paris Accord deal with this. However, I must tell you, those are the last articles that ever get negotiated. And therefore the process is pretty slow. But the principle is that there will be some countries and some industries who will be able to move faster in ensuring that they operate at emission levels far lower than today. And there will be some countries and industries who will not be able to move that fast. So this is carbon credits is a method to incentivize the people who can move faster to indeed move faster, right? But sometimes it's seen as if there is this big economic opportunity sitting out there. Hopefully there is, because if there is an economic opportunity, people will act. Sometimes it's seen as a solution to the problem. Nothing could be further from the truth. If we do not reduce emissions, if we do not move away from causing pollution, no amount of carbon credits or offsetting will be enough to solve for the climate problem. But if we take serious action in reducing emissions, moving to renewable energy, adopting electric transportation or hydrogen-powered transportation, changing the way steel is made and aluminium is made and chemicals are made and so on. If we do all of that, then this business of taking carbon dioxide or greenhouse gases out of the air will be one more solution in the right direction and will be effective. If organizations and nations choose to try and become net zero only by removing carbon from the air and on the other side keeping on increasing emissions, A, it will be an infeasible solution, and B, it will be way too expensive to fund, right? But, we are putting our bets on building carbon markets, whether they are voluntary or otherwise, which will hasten the process towards a net zero world.
Excellent. So that's a really nice comment. Any inputs on the last trend which you mentioned, and I'll come back with some more additional questions.
So the last trend that I thought we'll talk about is to adapt. And I kept that as one of the trends because we've already caused enough damage to the planet, and we are continuing to cause damage to the planet, as a result of which we have ensured that a lot of dystopian solutions will arise. Now, we have experienced in the last few years storms which are much stronger than before, storms in places where they never occurred before. So on the western coast of India, we almost never had cyclones. But now every year we have a few big ones, right? There's a clear change in the way the earth is behaving, right? I don't think we'd heard the term cloudburst before 2005. We'd never heard it. And now every occasional year we hear about a cloudburst here and a cloudburst there and a cloudburst somewhere else. We know that glaciers are melting, shrinking in size. It is a well-established fact. And every other day you'll hear of a chunk of ice breaking off from Antarctica, and the sizes of the chunks of ice that are breaking off are increasing by the day. So all of this is having dystopian effects on the way the earth operates. As a result, storms, flooding, droughts, diseases, all of these things are becoming more common and more intense, which means that before we solve the problem, we've got to adapt to the problems that we've caused. Projections show that coastal areas around the world, including cities like Bombay, are going to be flooded. So if we know that already, we must take steps to ensure that as sea level rises, flooding can be reduced. Unfortunately, when we build cities, or when we've built cities so far, say Bangalore or Chennai and others, one of the things we've almost always done is to look at a wetland area which drains away the excess water from us normally, put a lot of concrete and build buildings. Why? Because the area is open. We seem to have this insane urge to convert every marshland, every wetland area, any pond, any lakes. You know the story of Bangalore, 2,000 lakes down to 200 lakes, right? Whenever we see these places, we'll construct at one place, we'll take the debris, put it into a water body. After some time, water body will go away. It'll become flat land. We will construct over there as well. So we've actually increased our vulnerability to the increased precipitation, storms, hurricanes, and cyclones. Not only are they increasing, but our vulnerability is also increasing, right? And you marry the two, it's not a happy situation. So one needs to adapt.
Got it.
We will perhaps have sea walls like Holland. I don't know. We will actually have to take care that our Wi-Fi system, our communication system doesn't get disrupted. We survived COVID, but imagine getting into COVID without internet.
Got it.
What would we have done?
Got it. Excellent. So here, a couple of points. So you talked about, and I really liked what you mentioned about, emphasis on natural ecosystems, right? Because just creating new man-made solutions may not actually help, but actually create more secondary problem of their own. So from forestation perspective, any techniques used at Mahindra Group or wherever you have seen which really give great result, like for example, you've got the Miyawaki forestation as a technique, or I've seen people some videos on internet wherein they use like seed balls and use drones to kind of really do afforestation. So anything which you can share on that?
The simplest technique that works is regular plantation techniques. Miyawaki seed balls, good in urban areas to create urban forests, dense forests in small areas. Yeah, but those are not a very big climate solution, because we have to do forests over thousands of hectares of land. At the Araku Valley, where we've got close to 18-19 million trees now, the biggest technique is to plant it on the lands of people who value the trees and take care of it. One of the biggest problems we have with afforestation is you have a big afforestation drive, but the mortality rate is phenomenally high. So the mortality rate of trees we've planted along highways, for example, is as high as 70% to 80% and so on. But the survival rate of trees we've planted in Araku Valley is upwards of 90%. Because we do it on the lands of tribal people who value trees. Actually, most of the folks had some kind of a coffee plantation. Araku earlier was not famous for its coffee. In India, you would talk about Coorg or Chikmagalur or places like that. But after we started planting these fruit trees, not only did these trees provide shade to the coffee, the fact that they were fruit trees actually gave a new dimension to the coffee that was grown over there. And now Araku coffee is very fancy coffee.
Yes.
You get it in very fancy cafes, you get it in France and Australia and Ireland and in many other places. And the tribals are doing much better from an economic perspective, the
Right.
place where these trees are grown. So the biggest technology is grow trees at a place where people value it and ensure that the trees survive.
Right. And also, I think one of the insight which also one can derive is like any good system cannot work in isolation. You may have the best of technologies, but until you marry it with the human angle, right? That's what is going to give you great success. And I think what you shared as various aspects of sustainability in the Mahindra Group was really very nice and really gave a good insight. Thanks, Anirban, again for a great perspective. And thank you, dear listeners, for tuning in. Do subscribe, share, and like this podcast available on Apple, Spotify, and other podcast channels. Bye for now. Talk to you soon.